It's a pleasure to be here. Yeah, as Paul said, I'm from Jersey. When we get to the Q&A, my remarks will be about Afghanistan. When we get to the Q&A, though, feel free to ask about anything. Happy to talk about Iraq. Happy to talk about Iran. Happy to talk about other national security issues or problems we may have, particularly in how we actually form our national security policies. The one thing I won't talk about is I'm a Giants fan, and I won't talk about Giants. Okay, so, by way of introduction, I'm the director of the Afghanistan Study Group. I'm also a senior fellow at the Center for International Policy. Copies of our report are on the table over on my left. You can also find a copy of the report on our website, as well as a blog that we run. And really, when I say we, I mean my research assistant runs, because I don't write as well as he does. But it's at, the website is afghanistanstudygroup.org. And you, like I said, find a copy of the report there as well as other information. And so just to get to Paul's questions, first you said how does what we recommend differ from the Obama administration's policy? Primarily, it differs. I mean, if you go to our report, you'll see we have 5 recommendations in the report, and you'll see that they're heavy on the political aspect of it, and we also emphasize demilitarizing the situation. What the Obama administration has done since the president came into office 2 years ago has been to escalate the U.S. troop presence by over 50,000 troops in Afghanistan. And many of us have been saying that for every troop you send into Afghanistan, all you're going to do is find more people willing to fight them. So that's primarily our difference in how much we emphasize a political solution to the conflict, how much we emphasize a regional settlement, something that the United States government is not doing in any shape or manner right now in any meaningful way. And when I say a regional settlement, I mean, how do you get the Indians and the Pakistanis to give up Afghanistan as a proxy war? How do you bring the Iranians into the conversation? How do you bring the Russians and the Chinese and the Central Asian states and the Saudis to the table and get them all to commit to treating Afghanistan as a neutral nation and not interfering in Afghanistan's internal politics so that Afghanistan has a chance to succeed in terms of achieving some degree of political stability so that it can move to a more secure situation there and have a chance for development. So that's primarily how we differ. Again, emphasis on political reconciliation internally at local levels as well as national levels, and then the regional settlement, and of course the de-escalation of the conflict by withdrawing American troops or NATO troops out of southern and eastern Afghanistan. And our recommendation was to bring force levels down to 30,000 by 2012. We made that recommendation over the summer, so backed it up by 6 months. So sometime late 2012, 2013, we believe the United States should be down to 30,000 troops or less in Afghanistan. And at that point, moving forward, hopefully down to, in my view, I think we could be down to 15,000 or 10,000 a couple years after that, and a year or two after that, have no presence whatsoever in the country. The second question was, how do I foresee power sharing? The conflict there is incredibly multi-layered and incredibly multidimensional. And I already say you could explain it as a proxy war between India and Pakistan. You can also explain it as an ongoing civil war that we entered into in 2001. It had been going on for over 20 years before we put troops into the country. It's a conflict that had its origins back in the 70s. I trace it back to the deposing of the king in 1973. So we enter into this conflict in 2001. We take one side out of power, the Taliban, put the other side, the Northern Alliance, into power, and we don't address any of the underlying root causes of the conflict. And in fact, what we do is we set up a central government that is incredibly centralized, that invests almost all the power within the executive, so that if you're not within Karzai's clique, you're out of it. And so what you see happen in Afghanistan after several years of this, as we keep pumping money into the country, as we're propping Karzai's government up by foreign troops, if you're not in his clique, you're out of it. Well, then who's your only alternative to turn to? It's the Taliban. For years, what we've done in Afghanistan is we've given the people only 2 choices. You can either support the Kabul-based central government, which is composed, most likely, of your traditional rivals, that's backed up by foreign troops, or you can support the Taliban. It's a really bad choice. Okay, but for the southern Pashtuns and many of the Pashtuns in the east, the choice is I'm going to support the Taliban because they're, at the very least, they're ethnically and culturally similar to me. Okay, plus I'm being excluded from this government anyway. Okay, so when we talk about power sharing, it's how do you broaden the political process? How do you bring these disaffected, these disenfranchised groups into the political process? How do you get to the point where you're creating some form of political order so that there is a chance for stability, so that you can bring down the violence to some degree, and you do have a chance for development to occur. A lot of my thinking I base upon what I saw with the Sunni insurgency in Iraq when I was there in 04 and 05, and then again 05 and 06. For years, as we moved forward in Iraq, what we did was we took the Sunnis out of power. Okay, we took away their army. We then replaced those troops up in the air, the Shia troops, the Sunni troops. We replaced them with Shia troops and put them in the Sunni areas. Okay, then we conducted an election that the Sunnis were not a part of, and that was willful in a lot of ways, but we didn't do enough to make sure that they were engaged in the process. And so now they've got Shia troops representing a Shia-dominated government in Baghdad that's being propped up by the Americans who usurped them from power. So, you know, we're pushing them to support the insurgency. We're pushing them towards Al-Qaeda. They seem like they have no other choice. And it wasn't until 06 and 07 we started, particularly, say, in Anbar, with the Anbar Awakening, we started speaking with the tribal leadership, that legitimate leadership that had been usurped, that was supporting Al-Qaeda because they felt they had no other choice. It was when we reached out to them and said, hey, we can put you back into power. We spoke with them. We said, you have legitimate political grievances. And their grievances were, we don't want Shia troops in our Sunni cities. Okay, well, we'll stop putting Iraqi army units into your cities until they're full of Sunnis or until they're led by Anbaris. So it's those actual legitimate grievances that we addressed in Iraq that brought down the violence quite a bit, okay? So that's what you're talking about when you talk about power sharing. That's what you're talking about when you're talking about making deals. Those legitimate traditional leaders. And in Afghanistan, it's much more complex because things are on a much more local level. The concerns traditionally in Afghanistan and governance occurs at, you know, those valley and village levels. So that's what you're talking about, putting those people who are traditionally in power in those valleys and village back into power. So you get some degree of political order, you get some degree of political stability that allows you to move forward to a certain degree. So that being said, I'll launch into my talk here. I'll try and keep it on the brief side. Like I said, our copies of our report over there, it's on the web, so I won't go too much into our recommendations because otherwise I'll end up talking the whole time and you guys won't get a chance to ask any questions. And I won't be able to speak a bit about the political atmosphere that we see in Washington, D.C. That's where I'm based, so I spend a lot of my time working with a lot of members of Congress, both on the Democratic and Republican side. And I want to talk with you all briefly about polling we've done, as well as polling that the major networks has done, as well as what we see is happening right now in the House and the Senate with regards to Afghanistan, because most of you in here are engaged on this issue. Most of you are here because you just don't want to hear some other dude from New Jersey talk about it. You want to do something about it, most likely. So I just want to provide you with some of the things that are occurring in DC to help you out, you know, as you guys move forward.